MAP 138. This is loosely based on chapter 48, but it incorporates chapters 26 and 27 for the anatomy and physiology reminders that you may need. This is chapter 48, starting halfway about page 1013, talking about performing common blood tests. So, cells and platelets in general. There's a lot of things in these 3 lectures about red blood cells and cells that is not in the book. So you will have to try and listen to this lecture a couple of times. White blood cell and red blood cell counts. These are typically what is done in the lab, but it can be manual or automated. If it's manual red blood cell count, we've already done a blood smear in class, and that thins out the sample so that we can count them in a certain square area. It's not clear waved. It is considered highly technical to do white blood cell and red blood cell counts, so typically they are done in the lab. What do the results mean for white blood cell and red blood cell counts, or CBCs? White blood cells, they battle on the outside of blood in tissues. You may need an IND or antibiotics or both to help with the white blood cells. But once outside of the blood and they're in the tissues, the white blood cells, when they go out of the blood veins and capillaries to fight infection, they do not go back into the blood. However, lymphocytes are the one things that can go back into the blood. They're a different type of white blood cell, or they're one of the types of red blood cell, and it can go back into the blood. They get their uniform, if you think of them as soldiers wearing different uniforms, from the lymphatic system, and then they return ready to fight back into the lymphatic system. Normal values. There's a table 48.4, which starts on page 1013 in the book. The white blood cell range varies with age, but in the book it gives a very general one for leukocytes. Remember the averages for that one, please. The general term for white blood cells is leukocytes. There are different types. There are basically 5 different types of white blood cell. There are the ones which end in what I call Dr. Phil. The neutrophils, the basophils, and the eosinophils. Okay, and they're granular. They have little grains in their cytoplasm. Then there are agranular, which don't have any grains, and they have a single nucleus. The granulars sometimes have multiple nuclei in one cell, so you might see a couple of nuclei in those cells, but in these 2, lymphocytes and monocytes, they usually have no grains and they only have one nucleus. White blood cells, chapter 26 and 27 may help with the study of white blood cells as well, sort of for what they do. But please remember the percentage ranges in the book for neutrophils and lymphocytes, the ones that are on table 48.4. And here it just shows like a picture of what you might see under a microscope, an electron microscope, of a high white blood cell count. There's lots of white blood cells in that sample, and there are, of course, red blood cells. And this one next to it is the low blood cell count. So what do white blood cells do? They phagocytosis, which means all of them do this to some extent, but neutrophils and monocytes are the best at it. So what they do is they consume the bacteria. So here you see a picture, a cartoon picture, and then an actual microscope picture of phagocytosis happening, where it's sucking in, almost like a vacuum cleaner, it's sucking in the bacteria, breaking it down to its basic molecular structures, and then at the very end of that microscope picture you can see it's almost like blowing it out the other end. So it detoxifies. They detoxify poisons and substance removal. Eosinophils produce histamine, which give us our allergic reactions to things. So eosinophils give us our allergic reactions. Neutrophils are the first ones on site for any infection. Inflammation, they cause any injured tissue causes inflammation. The basophils, they also contain heparin, but basophils are the ones which cause this inflammation to make sure that we know there's something wrong. Remember, inflammation just tells us there's something wrong. Could be from anything. And here we have a picture that inflammation is the root cause of a lot of things. It's actually a root symptom. It's the first thing that alerts us that there's something wrong. And as we know, some inflammation is very stealthy. It doesn't show itself. Our immune response and antigen-antibody reactions, the lymphocytes deal with this, and they destroy harmful substance, and they create a memory. They remember what it was they saw before. And in this little cartoon there, you will see some antibodies being made. They remember the things that they fought off in the past. So white blood cells, they do fight off pathogens, but they are fussy. Each one does a different job. So neutrophils tend to do bacteria. Lymphocytes do viruses, and that's why our immune system is all to do with lymphocytes, different types of lymphocytes. So again, we have our 5 main white blood cells, but lymphocytes are actually, there's several different types, all to do with immunity. So within lymphocytes itself, there are lots of different types. The basophils increase inflammation, the eosinophils control inflammation, and the monocytes are the cleanup crew. So you'll have the neutrophils are going to be first on the scene. Potentially the lymphocytes, if it's a virus infection, will come on behind it, depending on what it is. The basophils, they increase inflammation to let everybody know that, hey, there's something going on here, we need more troops. And the eosinophils control that. They make sure there's enough troops out there, but there's still some in the blood for later on. We don't want to use all our white blood cells for this one little infection. We want to control it. So the eosinophils are the control guards. And then the monocytes are the cleanup crew after the war is over.